Ah, yes, the Boston Bruins, a team known for finding gems in late rounds, and somehow also drafting Zach Hamel in the top 10. In 2007, the Bruins used their 8th overall pick on Hamel, a WHL playmaker coming off a 93-point season with Everett. Scouts loved his vision, his hands, his potential to be the next great two-way center. Boston thought they were drafting Bergeron 2.0, but what they got was a ghost in a jersey. Hamel played exactly 20 NHL games, not in a season, in his entire career. 1 goal, 4 assists, and enough bus rides in the AHL to earn frequent flyer status. He spent more time on minor league ice than in a Bruins jersey. He wasn't bad, he just wasn't anything. The worst part? Look who Boston passed on. Logan Couture went 9th, Ryan McDonough 12th, Max Pacioretty 22nd. The Bruins could have walked away with a core. Instead, they drafted a caution sign. And maybe this was just foreshadowing, because 8 years later, Boston would somehow outdo themselves with the infamous 2015 draft. 3 straight first-rounders, 0 long-term contributors. But Hamel, he was the warm-up act. The bust before the storm. Zach Hamel wasn't just a miss. He was the NHL equivalent of letting the CPU auto-draft your future, and ending up with a guy who couldn't even crack the sim. In 2012, the Sabres thought they were getting a steal. Mikhail Grigorenko, a big, skilled Russian center with first-line upside, somehow slid to 12th overall, and Buffalo practically sprinted to the podium. He was supposed to be the future, the next great Sabres playmaker, the 6'3" answer to their post-Drury Briere identity crisis. Instead, he looked like he accidentally wandered into the NHL by mistake. Grigorenko had the size, the shot, and the hands, but his compete level? Missing. Defensive awareness? Non-existent. NHL impact? About the same as a fog machine in a snowstorm. He bounced between the Sabres and their AHL affiliate like a yo-yo on fire. They rushed him into the league, burned a year off his entry-level deal, then barely played him. Classic Buffalo development strategy. Draft a kid, ruin him, then wonder why he sucks. In 68 games with the Sabres, he had 14 points. 14. For comparison, guys like Tom Wilson, Tomas Hertl, and Andrei Vasilevsky were all taken after him in that same first round. Eventually, they shipped him off to Colorado in the Ryan O'Reilly trade, which somehow made both teams worse. A rare feat. Grigorenko left for the KHL by 2017, and the Sabres were left holding yet another broken prospect and asking themselves, why does this keep happening? Ah, the Red Wings. A franchise famous for finding late-round legends like Datsuk and Zetterberg. But even Detroit isn't immune to the occasional draft day disaster. And in 2008, they used their first-round pick on a goalie, Thomas McCollum. The Wings thought they were being clever, nab a 6'2" OHL netminder with star potential at the end of the first round to eventually take over for Chris Osgood. Future-proof the crease. Makes sense, right? Except McCollum never arrived. Not as a starter, not as a backup, not even as a reliable call-up. He played a grand total of 3 NHL games. Not in a row. Total. He let in 14 goals on 63 shots. His career save percentage, .879. That's not an NHL number. That's what happens when your beer league team puts a defensive man in the net because your goalie ghosted. Meanwhile, goalies like Jake Allen, Braden Holtby, and Anders Lindback all went later in that same draft. McCollum became a permanent fixture in the AHL, bouncing between Grand Rapids and obscurity. For a team that used to build dynasties off late-round brilliance, this one stung. And worse, it symbolized the end of the Wings' golden age, the moment the magic touch started to fade. 3rd overall. That's franchise player territory. That's we just found our cornerstone territory. So what did Florida do with it? They drafted Erik Gudbranson, a big, mean, hard-hitting defenseman who in theory was going to be the next Chris Pronger. Instead, he became the NHL's version of a traffic cone. Big, sturdy, and completely useless the moment someone skates past him. He had the size. He had the snarl. What he didn't have was hockey sense, or puck skills, or foot speed, or literally anything you want in a top-pairing defenseman in the post-2005 NHL. Gudbranson wasn't just bad. He was consistently bad. And because he was big and right-handed, teams kept giving him second chances. Vancouver, Pittsburgh, Anaheim, Ottawa, Calgary, Columbus, all convinced they could fix him. Spoiler, they couldn't. Meanwhile, who went after him in that same top 10? Just Ryan Johansson, Jeff Skinner, Cam Fowler, and Vladimir Tarasenko. No big deal, just a core of potential all-stars while Florida drafted a guy who spent more time in the penalty box than the offensive zone. Gudbranson played over 700 NHL games, and somehow never became good. A mystery of science, a marvel of persistence. a walking reminder that grit and character can't carry a breakout pass. The Habs just had one job in 2009. Don't let pressure get to you. But it was the NHL draft in Montreal. The Bell Center was packed and the crowd was chanting for a local kid. So the Canadiens caved to the moment and drafted Louis LeBlanc, a homegrown, Harvard-bound hometown hero. And then, nothing. LeBlanc looked the part for about 5 minutes. Smart kid, good skater, decent hands. The kind of player that gets called responsible when scouts are being polite. But the offense never came. The development stalled. And the pressure of being the chosen French one crushed him before he even got started. In total, he played 50 games for the Canadiens and scored 5 goals. That's not first-round material. That's random AHL call-up you forgot existed material. Meanwhile, guys like Chris Kreider, Ryan O'Reilly, and Marcus Johansson were all still on the board. But Montreal wanted a symbol, not a star. And they got exactly that. A guy whose name sounds good in the press conference, but disappears the second the puck drops. LeBlanc was traded to Anaheim for future considerations, which is NHL code for please make this go away. He never played another NHL game. This wasn't just a miss, this was the bust. In 1993, the Sens were a brand new team with a brand new chance to build a franchise. And they bet it all on Alexander Daigle, the most hyped prospect since Mario Lemieux. The speed, the hands, the flow, the attitude. This kid looked like a superstar. He even sounded like one. His quote on draft day, "I'm glad I got drafted first because no one remembers number 2. Well, number 2 that year was Chris Pronger. So yeah, people remember him. A lot. Daigle showed flashes early on, sure. But he didn't have the drive, the fire, the hunger. He once said he didn't want to play hockey. He just wanted to be famous. Mission accomplished. If being famous for busting counts. Over his career, Daigle played 616 NHL games across 6 teams and scored just 129 goals. That's fine for a mid-round pick. For a first overall, that's a tire fire in a jersey. The Sens gave him millions, put their future on his shoulders, and he gave them perfume commercials. No joke. At one point, he literally launched a cologne brand instead of a comeback. Daigle was so bad, he helped change the entire draft system. After him, rookie salary caps were introduced. That's how hard he flamed out. The league created rules to make sure no team ever did something this stupid again. In the year 2000, the Lightning looked at an offensively stacked draft class and said, "You know what we need? A giant Russian winger who scores once a month and skates like he's wearing ankle weights." Enter Nikita Alexeyev, 6'5", high ceiling, raw talent, and absolutely no clue how to use any of it. Tampa picked him 8th overall, ahead of guys like Marin Gaborik, Justin Williams, and Brad Boyes. Hell, they even picked him ahead of Scott Hartnell. And Hartnell wasn't even the best Scot in that draft. Alexeyev was supposed to be a power forward. He ended up being the hockey equivalent of a fog machine. All size, no substance. Over 5 seasons, he played 159 NHL games and managed just 20 goals. At that pace, Zdeno Chara could have outscored him if he played forward with one hand tied behind his back. He'd have one decent game every 40, just enough to make you wonder if he was turning the corner. Spoiler, he wasn't. And after bouncing between Tampa and the minors, they finally traded him to Chicago for Carl Stewart and a conditional pick. That pick could have been a used puck bag and it still would have been a win. Alexeyev finished his career in Russia, where he played 6 more years and was still forgettable. 1999, the year of the Sedins, the dawn of the millennium, and the Leafs' decision to draft Luca Chureta, a big Swiss center with some promise. Chureta was supposed to be the next Matt Sedin. Instead, he never played a single NHL game. Not one. But this wasn't just a case of a bad pick. Chureta's story is what happens when bad luck meets worse scouting. Shortly after being drafted, he was diagnosed with a heart condition so serious he needed open heart surgery just to keep playing at all. Tragic? Yes. But the twist? The condition was discovered during Leafs medicals. So either their pre-draft screening missed it entirely, or they took a flyer on a guy with invisible cardio stats. Chureta gave it a go in the AHL, but never looked like an NHLer. Meanwhile, Toronto passed on guys like Martin Havlat, Mike Commodore, and Henrik Zetterberg, players who actually suited up in playoff games, instead of on the injured reserve indefinitely. It's not all Chureta's fault, but in classic Leafs fashion, the pick symbolized everything fans had come to expect. Big hopes, no payoff. The Canes thought they were drafting an elite puck-moving defenseman. What they got was a highlight reel for the other team's goals. Murphy had wheels, no doubt, but defense? Not optional, just non-existent. Every shift was a fire drill. Every pinch was a coin flip. He spent 5 seasons bouncing between Carolina and the AHL like he was allergic to zone coverage. Meanwhile, the Canes passed on guys like JT Miller, Oscar Klefbom, and Ricard Raquel. Murphy was supposed to be their next Erik Karlsson, Instead, he was just Ryan Murphy, the guy who made every goalie behind him hate life. In 2008, the Jackets were desperate for offense, someone flashy, electric, game-breaking. So they took Nikita Filatov, a dynamic Russian winger with filthy hands and a rocket shot, and zero interest in playing north of the red line. Columbus thought they had a future star. What they got was a guy who made Alex Kovalev look like Mark Messier. Filatov wanted to score, and only score. Backcheck, forecheck, hard check. Nah, he checked out. He scored a hat trick in his first month, and Jackets fans thought they had something. Then he bolted back to Russia faster than a KHL flight itinerary. In total, he played just 53 NHL games, notched 14 points, and became a permanent what could have been in Ohio hockey lore. Meanwhile, they passed on Erik Karlsson. Yes, that Erik Karlsson. But hey, at least Filatov got a solid EA Sports rating for 1 year and some bonus air miles. The Devils built their identity on smart, reliable defensive men. Stevens, Niedermeyer, Danico. So in 2006, with the last pick of the first round, they decided to draft Matt Correnti, a tough physical blue liner who looked like he'd fit right in. Except he didn't. Correnti played just 34 NHL games, not in a season, total. And he didn't record a single goal, not one. You could have gotten the same offensive production from a goalpost. He was supposed to be a stay-at-home guy, but he barely stayed in the league. He bounced between New Jersey and the AHL, never stuck, and eventually disappeared into the ECHL obscurity before age 30. Meanwhile, the Devils passed on Milan Lucic, Brad Marchand, and Jeff Petrie, actual impact players. But sure, let's take a guy who peaked as a depth defenseman with good jam. Correnti wasn't bad because of injury or attitude. He just wasn't good at anything. This isn't just a draft bust. This is a cautionary tale taught in GM therapy sessions. The Isles held the first overall pick in 2000, and instead of taking Dan Heatley or Marian Gaborik, they went full galaxy brain and drafted a goalie, Rick DiPietro, over Henrik Lundqvist, over Ilya Bryzgalov, over, well, literally anyone else. To make room, they traded Roberto Luongo, who would go on to play nearly 20 seasons and become a Hall of Famer. DiPietro, he played 318 total games. That's not even 4 full seasons. And then came the contract. 15 years, $67.5 million. 15! It became the NHL's version of a timeshare scam. DiPietro was constantly hurt. Knees, hips, groin, pride. And by the end, he was more Band-Aid than goalie. He retired in 2013. The Islanders kept paying him until 2029. He's literally collecting checks during TikTok-era hockey for games he played when MySpace was still a thing. It wasn't just a bad pick. It was a franchise resetting blunder that haunted the team for 2 decades. Yes, 2003. Arguably the greatest draft class in NHL history. Get this, 28 of the 30 first-rounders played over 400 NHL games. And the one that didn't? Hugh Jessamine, picked 12th overall by the Rangers. Ahead of Zach Parise, ahead of Ryan Getzlaf, ahead of Brett Burns, ahead of Corey Perry. The Rangers could have tripped and landed on a 1,000-game NHLer. But they chose a guy who turned out to be an urban legend. Jessamine was a big-bodied winger out of Dartmouth, which should have been the first red flag. Size, check. Skating, meh. Production, middling. Impact, absolutely none. He never played a single game for the Rangers. In fact, he played only 2 games in the NHL, for Florida. He scored more AHL penalty minutes than points and became the rare draft pick whose Wikipedia page is longer than his pro stat line. Rangers fans still say Hugh Jessamine, the way horror movie characters whisper ancient curses. The Flyers thought they were getting a franchise center, a safe pick, NHL ready. Instead, they got a walking medical file with the production of a bottom 6 fill-in. Nolan Patrick was a consensus number 2 in 2017. He had size, hands, and hockey bloodlines. Philly fans thought they'd finally found their 1C to pair with Giroux, a Kopitar type to build around. But from day one, it felt off. Injuries, migraines, missed time, and when he was on the ice, he was invisible. Patrick played 3 seasons in Philly, scored 30 total goals, and looked allergic to impact. He didn't dominate. He didn't develop. He just drifted. Meanwhile, Cale Makar went 2 picks later. Yeah, Cale Makar, Norris winner, Conn Smythe, human cheat code. The Flyers could have had a generational defensive man. Instead, they drafted a ghost with a good jawline. Patrick was eventually traded to Vegas, then missed an entire season again. At this point, he's more cautionary tale than comeback story. There was a time when Angelo Esposito was the guy. Not a guy, the guy. He was projected to go first overall in early mock drafts. highlight reel goals, national hype, the next great French-Canadian star. And then, the actual draft happened. Esposito plummeted to 20th overall, and the Penguins, fresh off drafting Crosby, Malkin, and Stahl, figured why not add another weapon? What they actually added was a grenade with the pin already pulled. Esposito never played a single NHL game. Not one. The closest he came to NHL action was being part of the trade that sent Marian Hossa to Pittsburgh, which ironically helped the Pens reach the Cup final. After that, a torn ACL, then another, then a steep descent through the AHL, ECHL, and eventually Europe, where he became a trivia question in skates. He had the skill, the name, the hype, and absolutely none of the staying power. Imagine having a mid-first round pick in a loaded 2005 draft, right after a lockout, when the league is about to explode with speed and skill, and you use it on Sasha Pakalak, a 6'5", 220-pound defenseman from Cornell. Pakalak was drafted based on size, potential, and a handful of solid ECAC games against guys who now sell insurance. Scouts praised his raw tools. Keyword, raw. Like, still frozen, kind of raw. He had the height. He had the reach. He had the turning radius of a Zamboni and the puck control of a toddler with oven mitts. Pakalak never played an NHL game. Not one. He bounced around the AHL and the ECHL before finishing his career in European leagues most fans couldn't find on a map. Meanwhile, players like Tuukka Rask, TJ Oshie, Andrew Cogliano, and Matt Niskanen were all taken after him. Hell, Rask tormented the Caps for years, just to twist the knife. Pakalak became the punchline to a question no one asked. What if we drafted Hal Gill without the hockey IQ? The Coyotes desperately needed a franchise center, someone to build around, someone who could maybe convince fans to attend games that didn't feature $2 beer night. So they drafted Kyle Turris, 3rd overall, the highest pick in franchise history at the time. Turris was supposed to be that guy, dynamic, creative, flashy, but in Arizona, he looked about as dangerous as a foam puck. He never clicked, never took over. In 137 games with the Coyotes, he put up just 46 points. For a 3rd overall pick, that's Nickelback at a metal festival energy. He clashed with coaches, got benched, requested a trade, and in true Coyotes fashion, they dealt him for David Rundblad. Turris eventually found success in Ottawa and Nashville, but by then, Arizona had already lit the rebuild on fire. Again. Before Kane, Taze, and Cup parades down Michigan Avenue, the Hawks drafted Cam Barker, 3rd overall, right behind Ovechkin and Malkin. Yeah, that 2004 draft. Barker was supposed to be the next elite power play quarterback. He had the size, the shot, the vision. He also had the foot speed of a vending machine and the defensive awareness of a turnstile. He managed one fluke 40-point season, and then fell off the map like a corrupted file. Chicago traded him to Minnesota in 2010, and fleeced a Wild for Nick Leddy, who turned out to be everything Barker was supposed to be. Minnesota bought out Barker after just 71 games. He went from top 3 pick to overseas nomad in record time. Meanwhile, Blake Wheeler, Mike Green, Corey Schneider, and Alex Radulov were all still on the board, but Chicago locked in on Barker like a GPS glitch heading straight into a lake. In 2011, the Avs had already drafted Gabriel Landeskog at number 2. Great pick. Then at number 11, they figured, let's get tougher on the back end. So they grabbed Duncan Siemens, a throwback stay-at-home defenseman who played angry, and skated like he was angry at the concept of skating. Siemens was supposed to be the next Adam Foote, gritty, physical, mean. But while Foote punched guys and cleared the puck, Siemens just punched guys. That's it. His offensive upside was, please don't ice it. He played 20 NHL games. That's not a typo. He spent nearly a decade in the system and never cracked a lineup for more than a cup of coffee and a pregame stretch. Meanwhile, JT Miller, Oscar Klefbom, Brandon Saad, and John Gibson were all taken after him. That's an actual top 6 forward, a top 4 D-man, and a starting goalie. Passed over for a dude who peaked as a healthy scratch with a mean glare. 2009 was a deep draft. Hedman, Duchesne, Markstrom, Ryan Ellis. And Dallas? They went with Scott Glennie, a winger from Brandon who was supposed to be the next big thing. What they got was next to nothing. Scouts liked his speed and his shot, but apparently forgot to check if he could process the game at NHL speed. Glennie looked good next to Braden Shen and Jr. Problem was, Braden Shen wasn't coming with him. He played exactly 1 NHL game. 1. Got called up, skated around for 10 minutes, and was never seen again. That's not a draft pick, that's a cameo. Glennie spent most of his pro career in the AHL, where he was fine. Not a disaster, but fine doesn't cut it when you're a top 10 pick in a loaded class. Oh, and just for fun, the next 3 players taken were Jared Cohen, Magnus Payarvi, and Ryan Ellis. Not world beaters, but at least they showed up. In 2005, with the entire league drooling over the deepest draft class in decades, the Wild had a golden opportunity, 4th overall. a chance to land a franchise cornerstone. They took Benoit Pouliot, a lanky, skilled winger from the QMJHL with size, flash, and the consistency of a vending machine Wi-Fi signal. Pouliot looked like an NHL player, long strides, smooth hands, great frame. The problem? He brought his A-game about once every 11 business days. One night he'd score a highlight reel goal. The next 4, you forgot he dressed. In 67 games with the Wild, he managed 11 points. That's not 4th overall production. That's random third-line call-up from Iowa numbers. He eventually got traded to Montreal, then bounced around the league like a live grenade. Edmonton, Buffalo, Tampa, New York. He was the NHL's version of a hard drive with 1 decent file and 30 corrupted ones. Meanwhile, Anze Kopitar, Carey Price, and Mark Stahl were all still available. But sure, take the guy with elite float per 60. Ah yes, the rare moment when a team with a loaded goalie pipeline decides, you know what we need? Another one. So in 2008, Nashville, already home to Pekka Rinne and developing Anders Lindbach, drafted Chet Pickard, 18th overall. Why? Good question. Pickard had decent WHL numbers and NHL size, but it quickly became clear that being big in the net doesn't help when your angles are off, your glove is late, and every rebound turns into a scoring chance for the other team. He never played an NHL game. Not one. He spent his pro career bouncing around the AHL and ECHL. Then he pieced out to Europe faster than a Bridgestone Arena beer line after a 3-goal collapse. Meanwhile, players like Jordan Eberle, Tyler Ennis, and John Carlson were all taken later in the round. That's top 6 forwards and a cup-winning defenseman passed up for a guy whose NHL highlight reel is just the draft podium. Goalies are a voodoo. Everyone knows that, but in 2004, the Blues still took a swing with Marek Schwartz, a Czech goaltender hyped as the next Dominik Hasek. If Hasek had butterfingers, bad angles, and panic in his veins, Schwartz had international pedigree and good junior stats. But once he hit North America, reality check. He played 6 NHL games, total. His save percentage? A scorching .809. That's not an NHL stat. That's what you get when you put a folding chair in a net and pray it gets in the way. St. Louis kept him in the system for a few years, hoping something would click. It didn't. By 2010, he was back in Europe, where he quietly disappeared into the draft bust witness protection program. And yes, the Blues took him ahead of Corey Schneider, David Krejci, and Johan Franzen. That's an all-star goalie and 2 cup winners. Passed over for a human red light bulb. The Jets had one job in 2016, draft someone who could skate in the modern NHL. So naturally, they picked Logan Stanley, a 6'7" defenseman whose entire appeal was being tall. He was like if you drafted a street lamp and hoped it could pivot. Scouts said he had a big shot, physical edge, and developing foot speed. Spoiler, it never developed. Stanley moves like he's dragging 2 snowplows through a slush pit. His puck skills? Let's just say his stick has seen more dump-ins than breakout passes. He's had spurts of NHL action, but it's mostly been third-pairing insurance policy who panics under pressure. The upside the Jets dreamed of never showed up. Meanwhile, Kiefer Bellows, Sam Still, and Alex DeBrincat, who scored 40 goals twice, were still on the board. They passed on a sniper to draft a human traffic cone. Some first-round picks become franchise pillars. Others become cautionary tales. Logan McMillan. He became a trivia question no one gets right. In 2007, the Ducks had just won the Cup and were looking to reload. So they drafted McMillan, a gritty two-way winger from the QMJHL with a ceiling of a middle 6 forward and a floor of who? He played 0 NHL games. 0. Nada. Zilch. He lasted 3 years in the Ducks system before being traded for a conditional 7th-round pick, which might be the most polite way of saying, please take him off our hands. Meanwhile, players like Max Pacioretty, David Perron, and Jamie Benn, a 5th-rounder no less, went later. Anaheim could have had firepower. Instead, they took a guy who peaked at notable AHL depth. In 2008, the Flames thought they had found a gem late in the first round. Greg Niemes, a 6'3" winger from Windsor who looked like the perfect power forward prospect. Big frame, decent hands, decent vision. Unfortunately, decent doesn't cut it when your entire NHL impact is less than a pregame warm-up skate. Niemes played 15 NHL games and scored exactly 1 goal. Even that felt like a mercy bounce. He wasn't fast enough for the top 6, not tough enough for the bottom 6, and not impactful enough for any 6. He quickly faded into the AHL, then into coaching, which honestly was his best shift in pro hockey. Oh, and for context, Calgary took him over Tyler Ennis, Roman Josi, and Derek Stepan. Yes, Roman Josi, Norris winner, franchise cornerstone, passed up for a guy who made healthy scratch sound like a career title. You knew this one was coming. The crown jewel of Oilers draft disasters. Nail Yakupov. First overall in 2012, billed as the next Ovechkin. What they got was more like the next Yakupov, a chaotic, high-speed turnover machine who made every shift look like it was filmed in fast forward, and then thrown into reverse. He scored 17 goals as a rookie, and somehow got worse every year after. His hockey IQ was somewhere between low and lost. His defensive zone coverage, optional. His shooting accuracy, aggressively random. And remember, this wasn't a weak draft. Edmonton passed on Morgan Rielly, Hampus Lindholm, Philip Forsberg, and Andrei Vasilevsky to pick the hockey equivalent of a Roman candle. By 2017, Yakupov was out of the league, a first overall pick with more KHL games than NHL goals. The 2004 draft was loaded. Ovechkin, Malkin, Schneider, Krejci, Wheeler. Everywhere you looked, talent was dripping off the board. And with the 11th overall pick, the Kings selected Lauri Tukkonen, a Finnish winger with a nice stride, decent size, and less finished than a half-painted garage door. Tukkonen was hyped as safe, high-upside forward. Turns out safe was just code for zero risk of ever being noticed. He played 5 NHL games and scored 0 points. His biggest impact was taking up a jersey number someone else could have worn. After a few seasons of meh in the AHL, LA shipped him off for literally anything that moved. He went back to Finland and became a what happened answer on every Kings fan forum. And yes, LA passed on Drew Stafford, Travis Zajac, Corey Schneider, and a certain Alex Radulov, guys who actually played in the NHL. 2006 was a solid draft. The Sharks had a mid-first-round pick and could have grabbed a future NHL staple. Instead, they went with Ty Wishart, a 6'5" defensive man whose scouting report said raw potential, but forgot to mention zero polish. Wishart had the size of a shutdown D-man and the awareness of a confused tourist. He looked like a dominant force standing still, and a defensive liability the second anyone else moved. San Jose traded him before he even sniffed their NHL roster, to Tampa Bay, where he somehow played 26 games and scored 2 goals, which feels like a statistical clerical error. He finished his career bouncing around Europe and the AHL like a human LinkedIn page for once drafted defensive men. And yes, the Sharks passed on Claude Giroux, Semyon Varlamov, and Nick Foligno to draft a guy whose greatest hockey achievement might be existing in NHL 11. Alright, hear me out. It's early. It's very early. But when a player falls from projected first overall to 4th, and every scout team screams, "Steal!" you expect fireworks, not a developmental delay. Enter Shane Wright. He was hyped as a next great two-way center, a cerebral force, a guy who would anchor Seattle's top line for the next decade. But instead of taking over, Wright looked like he accidentally loaded into the NHL on rookie mode. Scratched, demoted, loaned to the AHL, then to the World Juniors, then back to junior, then benched again. His NHL presence so far, quieter than Climate Pledge Arena during a Coyotes matinee. And let's be real, Seattle passed on Logan Cooley, who looks like an electric offensive weapon in Arizona. Meanwhile, Wright's highlight reel is mostly decent backcheck and looks focused during warm-ups. Could he still turn it around? Sure, but so far, the only thing he's dominating is the disappointment index. Their first ever draft pick, the face of the future, the guy who'd carry the franchise when the expansion hype cooled off, Cody Glass, 6th overall in 2017. He had size, skill, smarts, everything you'd want in a top-line center, except apparently the ability to stay healthy, confident, or in the lineup. Glass struggled with injuries, inconsistency, and a total lack of traction. One game he'd finish flash potential, the next, he'd vanish like a blackjack chip in the Bellagio. In 66 games with Vegas, 22 points. That's not terrible. Until you remember Nick Suzuki, Martin Necas, and Josh Norris were all taken after him, and are now lighting up top lines across the league. Vegas gave up quick, shipping him to Nashville in a 3-way Nolan Patrick for nothing trade. Meanwhile, their win-now core rolled on without him, leaving Glass as a trivia footnote under a first draft pick they bailed on faster than their prospect development system. Every pick is a promise. Some become legends. These became lessons. Painful, expensive, unforgettable lessons. Drop your team's worst pick in the comments. Let's grieve together. And remember, hope gets drafted every year, but regret, that one sticks around.